Celebrity Book Club.
Oh, my lover. Who is it?
Maria, darling, it's Sir Rudolph Bing, the director of the Metropolitan Opera.
Sir Rudolph Bing, do I know you?
Yes, Maria, I've hired you to sing for the 54th season of La Chianti.
Oh, of course.
Come in. I'm just rehearsing.
Maria, darling, hi. Yes, it's me. It's Rudolph.
Oh, Bing, darling. Mwah, mwah. How are you?
We're very, very excited to have you perform this season. As you know, there's a slight problem. We simply cannot do the $3,000 American per performance that you are asking for.
Benisassi, do you hear that? He can't do the 8,000. Well, Chicago wants to give me 1,000 to do Aida at the Chicago Lyric Opera.
Yes, but darling, you're not going to be exposed to the same kind of audience that you would be here in New York. And also, I have to say, the budget for weekly flights to and forth from Rome, it's simply not going to be possible either.
Darling, I need to fly my teacher. My teacher's in Roma. My husband's in Roma. We always fly. We have practices. We have dinners.
Also, you've asked for a budget of an entire Virginia ham in the dressing room every single night. That's not going to be possible either.
Oh, how do you think I sing so well? I eat ham.
Maria, darling, you're one of the most incredible performers
I know.
in the industry. Of course, we love to have you here for the entire season, and all of our patrons are very, very excited about you. But you...
Oh, you're so sweet, Bing.
Yes. But you also must simply stop putting your cigarettes out in the eyes of the young children who are working in the orchestra pit, cleaning the shoes of the violinists. It's very difficult to have to explain why the little sons and daughters are coming home to their parents with their faces all mangled.
Growing up in Greater Roma, do you know my father? He would smoke a cigarette and he would say, "Sing for me, Maria," and then I would sing for him. If it was not good enough, he would put cigarette out in my eye.
Maria, listen, I'm going to say something to you, right? I'm going to be very honest. You look wonderful, okay? The weight that you've lost is very impressive. But I do know that you were under enormous financial stress by being sued by your former manager.
Oh,
and if
I fucking bastard.
If you
bastard.
If you agree to do this, I will pay you in cash. And therefore, your former manager will not be able to get his grubby little mitts on your salary.
Oh, Bing, how about this? You pay me in cash, but you pay to my husband first because he deals the money. We do an offshore lot bank account thing. And I will stop with the cigarettes, but I also want my dressing room filled with my favorite cigarettes when I come in. And I want 2 hams. I want to gain the weight back.
All right, listen, it's a deal. Pay it in cash. No more cigarettes. Double the ham. Thank you, Maria.
Perfecto, Bing. Perfecto.
Good luck.
Passionissa.
Who's that knocking at the door? It's all your friends, you filthy whore. Your husband's gone and we've got books and a bottle of wine to kill. It's Hollywood. It's books. It's gossip. I'm shook. It's memoirs. It's martinis. It's Studio 54. It's Fellini. It's Celebrity Book Club. Come read it while it's hot. Celebrity Book Club. Tell your secrets, we won't talk. Celebrity Book Club. No boys are allowed. Celebrity Book Club. Say it loud and proud. Celebrity Book Club.
Buzz me in, I brought the Cuervo.
Hey, best friend!
How are you?
It's so good to see you, milady.
Oh, you look plump.
Thank you.
Big, just how I like my singers.
I've been on many, many vacations in Argentina and Italy.
Que pasa, Stephen?
It's really good to see you.
Yeah, really good to see you, too.
It's been a wild week. I was at a birthday party last night. I was playing four-hand piano.
Which means you're playing piano with another
man.
With another fellow. That's what they're calling it these days.
Yeah.
Four-hand piano. Okay.
Which I thought was very apropos because, of course, this week we read a book that was highly musical.
Highly, highly musical. We read a book this week.
Yeah.
And, this just came to me on a Amazon.com search. Now, the book is called
5,000 Nights at the Opera, the memoirs of Sir Rudolph Bing. And of course,
I clicked on it and I was like,
Yeah.
well, this seems fabulous. And I feel like I asked my mom about it and she was like, Sir Rudolph Bing. Well, he was only about the sassiest manager of the Metropolitan Opera known to man.
And he certainly was. So he was the general manager of the Metropolitan Opera, which is, of course, New York's famed opera house.
From around years 1950 to
1972 or something like that.
Yes.
It was a good 20-year run. And of course, for those of you who don't know, you may have heard of Lincoln Center. You've seen this beautiful space within New York. It's around 66th Street, somewhere around there.
He really put
it on the map.
Okay,
Yeah.
It came alive. I mean, honestly, before that area,
Yeah.
Lincoln Center, people said, "Don't go there, darling."
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think this was, I don't think there's a neighborhood in New York that at some point people didn't say, oh, darling, it was only for the drugs, the druggies and the pushers.
Right, and you're like, what? It's the opera.
So this book is really absolutely wild. Like, my references for the book coming in were like Peggy Guggenheim and Ben Franklin and some of the more historical things that we've done. But it's so dense. It's this insane and it is very bitchy, but like it's almost like impossible to parse the bitching. I mean, like you see the bitchiness,
Right.
but it'll be like about this incredibly specific things you've never heard of. Just like, well, darling, and of course, and so then I moved to Gerstenstrasse, and their theater could barely be called a theater, and I had to hear people sing for Tristan and Isolde. And if you think that isn't the worst thing imaginable, then I don't know what to tell you.
And he'd be like, and then Ebert, of course, said, well, give me a mezzo soprano. And I said, oh, wish I could, but everyone is absolutely horrible. So I would never recommend any of these Eastern German mezzo sopranos to anyone in West Germany. So of course I took a vacation in Vienna. And you're like, okay, let's take a breath. So like,
But
yeah,
there is no breath. It's just this constant list of like different mezzo sopranos, different managers at different small theaters in Germany who then he did later work with 25 years later.
In New York. I know at first I was like, oh, well, and it's also, it's a slim book. It really looks kind of old-timey. So old-timey that I lost my copy. Well, first the cover fell off. It's this total like the book looks like a used bookstore in that way. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Where it's like yellowed pages. Like you're just in like maybe a bookstore in, I don't know, a vacation town or something like that. And you come upon it and you're like, ugh. And there are like little, black and white photographs.
There's fabulous black and white photos of him like playing chess with Richard Tugger on Rigoletto set in Boston, 1952.
It didn't seem a classic, also kind of old-timey memoir where
Not
he's
a
like,
lot of personal details.
it's like, well, and I would walk in the woods alone when we would vacation in the Dolomites as a child with my terrier.
So, at the beginning of the book, I was kind of getting this faggy vibe from him because he kept saying like, well, darling, I simply didn't want to play badminton with my cousins while we were in Chamonix. And you're like, same, I didn't want to. He was like, and they all were terribly encouraged to play the sporting events, and I just couldn't be bothered. I wanted to do more artistic endeavors.
He wanted music.
Right. He was.
And so...
I'm thinking like, okay, this guy's going to be a fagota, right?
Well, that thing's like, from the get-go, you're like, this is the biggest faggot ever.
And then he like reveals, he's like, and then I met a woman, and of course it was love, so we got married. Her name was Nina Skolskamaya Stetsklukia.
And she was a ballerina with the Vienna Volkskenhagen. Oh, he also made this reference to, he was like, and of course, like all the young men in Vienna at the time, I fell in love like with a ballerina from this company. And like all the nasty, how is it, Viennese?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. Viennese rascals,
No, I know. It's very like the ballerina, like those thin ballerinas, like those were just like
the baddies.
The hotties.
And like guys
just
were
like
scooping them up.
Those were like the crop top Times Square Aimé Lingerie girls of the day walking around with their like crossbody Chanels, and they were like, we all like, fuck yeah. Like we all wanted just like one of these hot cheesy girls.
Well, but wouldn't it be more like they're the like models or something?
I'm referring to like the Nolita-fied version. Like,
Yes,
these are
yes.
the cheesy girls.
Right. My only thing with that is, and if I just may,
You think they're more like actually like fashion model girls, where they're more the like
yeah, like they're
okay.
ballerinas, like they're thin. They're not just being like, this is my day in New
they're
York,
not being
girls.
Okay. I do.
This is my day in Austria.
I kind of do think that Nina Bing, though, is a little bit like, this is my day in Austria. I wake up, my husband goes to work at the opera. Because, like, the opera was more mainstream back then.
That
Do you
is
know
true,
what I mean?
and that's why it's like you can be gay without being gay. Like, it
Yes.
was more mainstream to just...
You could just be, like, a straight guy working
Well,
the opera and knowing...
And this is also,
all
not to
the
bring it back
players.
again to my family, but this is my mother's defense of why my father is not gay, is because it was just like, you could just be a cultured man who loved the opera.
And he is from 1920s Vienna.
And he would literally he would wait outside and get like rush tickets to go to Bing's years to the opera.
Wow.
To like get Renata Tebaldi's autograph because he was like in love with her, darling. She was like, your father, my mom would be like, your father gay? Please. He would wait outside the Metropolitan Opera to get Renata Tebaldi's autograph.
Have you ever heard anything straighter? I mean, my goodness. The man could barely keep it in his pants for Renata. No, it's like, and this is the moral is like men were gayer in the past.
Yes.
Straight men were gayer in the past. They had interests. They were
Right.
cultured.
And then Reagan, stepped in.
It literally
and-
is all Reagan's fault. Like, Reagan turned every straight man into an absolute gorilla.
Right, these jocks.
Yeah.
So I see what you mean about Nina. And that's very fast. We get to Nina fast and they marry. And
then he's like, and thank God you changed your name to Nina Bing.
Anyway, Bing and Nina, they're always like renting this furnished room. And then like at one point they like go to these like grounds. Maybe this is during the war. I honestly can't keep track. Like him and another crew. He's always talking about this man, Ebert.
Yeah, Ebert was like a central character that came a lot, but I think they ended up working together at that place.
Glyndebourne.
Glyndebourne.
At one point during the book where I was like, literally drink every time he says Glyndebourne. I was like, girl, and what is Glyndebourne?
Okay, so he's running around Germany, blah, blah, blah. Then at one point they go back to Berlin and they're running a theater there. And he was like, Anna, we lived in one of those massive Berlin apartments
yes.
that's simply too large for two people. And good friends of us gave us a ping pong table and we would play ping pong late into the night at 3 a.m. having it back and forth.
Back and forth, volley, back and forth,
so
back
that's what
and
makes
forth.
me think he is so straight. And it's him and Nina Bing playing ping pong and just like having so much vermouth.
Well, right, because can't you imagine he's in this like blazer and the cravat, right? And they're circling and it's just like sweet vermouth. And he's like, another vermouth, Nina. And he's slapping her ass. And he's like, how I love it to watch you walk away. As she like pours his like tiny little special vermouth like sambuca cup, and he's like, another round.
So then after Berlin, they like the war is sort of happening in this Peggy Waits. Everyone's like, and Darlene, they were trying to leave, but then my cousin was still in France, and everyone's kind of like slowly trying to get the fuck out of Central Europe.
I feel like his like contract, he was like, well, I would never leave on a contract, but the Nazi occupation did seem to be getting a little more serious.
Yeah, he was like,
Yes.
it did get a bit out of hand. And of course, Dresden was much of a Nazi city than the way that Berlin was at the time. And if you were there, you know what I'm talking about, of course. No, because there was this point where he was like, I had this contract with this like theater, and then he was just like, and then like stormtroopers literally like, came to the office, and he was like, I'm getting the vibe that like
we gotta go,
and like you're not gonna be actually honoring this contract and like maybe putting me in jail boots because like I am like a social democrat and I'm like open about that. But then there was the point at which like this was like so like it's still in the 30s when the Nazi government was like, we do want to like Germanify like the Czechoslovakia. So like, will you go to Czech Republic and like or it wasn't Czech Republic then, but like go to this area of Czech and do like German plays?
Right.
And he was just like, well, darling, of course, like...
I guess I could.
If they're going to have the budget. And then he was just like... And so, of course, then I had Oppenheim, who was a Jew, and, like, I'm sure the Nazis didn't love that. And so he has been so, like, okay, we'll go do this, like, nationalist propaganda, like, German plays in Czech, but, like, I'm doing it with my, like, Jewish, intended musical director, and then a couple of other social democrats, like, in the cast. And,
and then he was
of course, we'll be broke by Christmas, darling. And we were broke by Thanksgiving.
This was my favorite quote. He was like, and of course I was a social democrat, as we all were. He was like, but I was Austrian, so I wasn't doing anything political. And I didn't think that of like him like not voting or something, or him just being like, well, that's the Austrian way. Like, of course my beliefs, which I'm kind of obsessed with, he is just being also like Twitter in that way, where he's like, well, of course, like I am this. I'm not really going to do anything, but you know.
He's
darling.
He's not being so just like, oh no, and then I'm joining the resistance.
No. I mean, he was resisting his own way by hiring...
Yes, by hiring a Jew. And he like is pretty sure that his brother was in the like Maquis, the like Austrian, like French rural resistance. Do you remember this part where he was like, and then I heard like a radio transmission from this like guerrilla like rebel resistance telling people that like it was actually too dangerous and like they should actually like
This is vaguely ringing a bell.
anyway, but he was like, and I distinctly like knew that it was my long lost brother's voice that I've never mentioned in this memoir until now, but like while I was hiding out in Glindenberg.
Which is like also like imagine just hiding on Glindenberg and you're getting that you're hearing random
radio transmission and I'd be like, oh my God, that's my brother. So he was in the resistance. Good for him.
I guess that is kind of Facebook. You are like finding, you're like, I just messaged with my long lost stepbrother.
Okay, so the early part of his career, he's going around to different like opera houses in Germany. And it's very just like every small German town you've never heard of has like a fabulous opera house that's like paid for by the local government. And it is also very just like European governments do support the arts in a way.
So right, he's working in these German opera houses and...
Wait, but can I...
Oh,
okay, do you remember the part where... Okay, I'm just going to read this one part. Of course, the star system as practiced in Berlin was not the kind of problem it became 20 years later. In 1931, singers still had moral and artistic integrity. Their prime concern was the mastery of their craft, the preservation of their vocal ability, and, believe it or not, their duty to their public and to their theatre. We did, however, have in Berlin one episode with a star singer worse than anything I've ever experienced later. When the husband of one of our best sopranos, Gertrude Bindernagel, shot her dead on stage during a performance, I believe for some reason of jealousy. And then it just like goes on to talk about like other random singers. And you're just like, I'm sorry, Gertrude Bindernagel was shot dead on stage. And
well, isn't that a common thing?
I don't think that was common that an opera singer was shot dead in the middle of a performance.
Not common, but I feel like
crimes of jealousy.
Crimes of jealousy, especially with opera, because it's always about operas are always about like, you know, someone being killed for love.
Right.
Anyway, and I feel like sometimes life
imitates art.
Exactly.
And this is the most tragic part of it all. She wasn't even cheating on her lover. It was a case of mistaken identity.
No.
Yes. Yes.
No, darling.
Yes. Gertrude Bindernagel shot dead.
She shot dead because of what?
Yes.
One crazy man's...
Yes. Well, I mean, the misogyny, the jealousy, the anger, the violence. And of course, this was before the war.
In the 20th century, what era would you like to go back to in time travel? I mean, be in like your age now.
You know that artist, Bibi Rexha?
Yes. Who's in the Albanian crew?
She's in the Albanian mafia with Dua Lipa. And like someone asked her on the internet, they were like, oh, what time period would you want to live in? Like if you could live in any time period. And she said, Paris in the 40s. Just like Nazi-occupied Paris.
Obsessed.
I'm really obsessed with. But you know, when you ask me that question, of course I want to think I'm very Diana Vreeland about it. We're like, oh, New York in the 20s or New York in the 60s, you know.
Right.
What an amazing time. And of course, as a gay man, and then I think, oh, well, New York in the 70s, the sex.
Oh, yeah. And we'd fuck
till we couldn't fuck anymore. And then we'd do it all over again.
No, but I mean, yeah, of course. Would I like to be like a fully like fab bootlegger in the 20s?
Yeah. Or if you were like a rich person, like in so Gilded Age, and you did have like so many servants at your like Fifth Avenue mansion in like 1902.
I'm actually not about 1902. It's a little still too clop for me. Like I need the.
You want a car?
Yeah, I'm kind of like trying to get my own
honk, bitch.
Celebrity Book Club.
I want to read this part that I think honestly we can really relate with, and as kind of wine snobs.
Okay.
I must admit, though, that the major of our profit was the sale of wines in the restaurant. A refugee wine merchant, Dr. Loeb, persuaded Christie that Mozart deserved the very best in German wines, and that the audience for Mozart would be willing to pay for them. Sales often exceeded 100 bottles in an evening, though Glyndebourne at its largest never held more than 450 seats. So people are like downing bottles throughout this.
Wait, was this the person who then became like the advisor on German wines to the king?
He goes, Christie had to build a new cellar to hold the supply. He became an official advisor to the king on German wines as a result of Glyndebourne's reputation in this area. And during the war, he sold the cellar at auction, feeling that post-war patrons would not be able to afford such luxuries for almost 100,000. My own palate was both educated and spoiled by Christie's German wines. To this day, I can drink nothing but the best, which is far too expensive for a mere general manager of an opera house. I also I feel like that would be cooler if Lincoln Center did that today. I feel like they're just having like the big Josh and you're getting like a wine to go see the opera and it costs $28 and it's like...
Yeah,
so
they should be. I mean, they're like not giving you actual glasses, like which is so
you're
deeply
getting
uncivilized.
It, like this big Pepsi cup.
Yeah, they should be giving you like a crystal glass with like a beautiful wine that is paired from the region where the composer's from.
If you're going to see a symphony, darling.
Okay, so Glyndebourne is like in England and he gets this job like doing this random, just like kind of destination opera, like in the middle of the English countryside. But then at one point he like goes to London in the war and he's doing like working as like a wartime rationing clothier, like at this weird like shop.
Absolutely.
Okay, so first of all, this passage. So he's working at this store. One of the worst battles I had was with a buyer who had purchased a consignment of ink pots with covers depicting the heads of Churchill and Roosevelt, complete with cigar and cigarette in holder. One lifted their scalps to find black or red ink. I imagine in those days it was Churchill's head that held the red ink. It's like, I don't even get what that joke is. I simply refuse to place these
like blood was on his hands?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I simply refused to place these monstrosities on display, and ultimately I was summoned to explain my conduct to the chairman himself.
That sounds like something I am buying.
That was literally what I wrote down in my notes. I was like,
stop.
This is literally,
Wait.
He's offended by these ink pots that are so Lily. I was just like, you would so buy this. You're like, okay, this is so cool. Like, it's this ink pot. You open Churchill's head and the ink is inside.
No, and I'm like, it's crazy because I actually,
really creepy.
I got 4 for $50 at this estate sale of like Churchill's head. So like now Maya could use it for her India ink. Now cut to me going home tonight, like searching eBay and antiquearena.com for like Churchill's head ink.
No, and it's just like
pots.
Rudolph Bing would be so insulted by your sensibilities, by your like retro rockabilly. Like he'd be like,
oh, the
so
dolls.
tacky. Okay,
so he gets to New York.
Well, no, but after hold on quickly. So then he invents the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, I believe, because he is just like. And then we went to Edinburgh, and I convinced them that they had to do this festival. And like, I feel like
he's so iconic. It's crazy because like he is running, like he is such a girl boss in like this insane way. It's like,
yeah, no, I mean, he's business about it. He has an incredible artistic eye. And then he's also been like, because remember in the beginning, he was just like, a big part of being a manager is the scheduling. And so I would put out all these he like was doing the first like Google Calendar when he was like putting all these pages on the floor of his office, like handwritten, trying to figure out like when people should be rehearsing in different halls at different times. And it's like now he could just go to Monday.com and set up like a booking schedule.
Right. And just being like, Maria Callas, your room 302.
Wait. This would be such a like Super Bowl ad for Monday.com where it's like someone in the 30s trying to do scheduling.
We need to make that ad. And it's like this dark, and it is being so Gilded Age, this huge office, and all these opera singers are storming in being like, why is she in my room?
And then it's like Eva Longoria appears from the future, and it's like, try Monday.com. Oh, that's mortifying. Okay.
Okay.
So then he moves to New York. Okay, can I read the section where he describes the opening night crowd at the Met and how offensive it is?
Yeah.
Many of those in the audience were people who came to the opera only this once every year. Cafe society of the lowest order. Gossip writers from the gutter press. Celebrity seekers and clowns looking for the publicity the newspapers and now television would give any freakish occurrence or appearance at the Metropolitan's opening night.
Literally us. Just like any people trying to go to open gutter.
Absolute gutter sluts.
Gutter sluts. Best line ever from the movie The Faculty. Gossip, gutter sluts. Clowns. Absolute clowns. I'm like, that crowd sounds so fab. And it's like all these like insane like gossip rag columnists like searching to get a glimpse of like Toscanini.
Yeah, and they're like hoping that Toscanini is going to have some row with like one of the mezzo sopranos and like be so wasted before he gets on stage.
And they're writing this and Bing is like peering out of his heavy velvet curtain and is just like, oh, cretins, clowns. Okay, this part just in his interview when he's like being interviewed by the Metropolitan Opera and is like wondering, they're not offering him like that much money, but he stays at this hotel and he leaves. Do you remember this part? He leaves his shoes out in the hallway because that was customary in Europe.
Oh, right.
And for them to be
to like shine your shoes as you slept. Yes.
And then you wake up and your shoes are shined. And then he's like, and I opened the door. And there were no shoes.
Darling, they were stolen.
Yes, they were stolen. He had to go to meetings all day and interview to become the manager with no shoes on.
But didn't he have like other...
Well, I think he wore other shoes. But
right.
I mean,
but they weren't his shined shoes.
Yes, his shined shoes. So absolutely horrifying.
Dastardly.
Yes.
One thing that is, really kind of stuck out to me, this book is like how much funding there seems to be for the arts and like even in small cities. And, that's obviously more common in Europe than it is in America. But like, to this day, I was like, is there that kind of funding? But, at that high level, there is. Because I was talking to a friend recently who said, darling, the general manager of the Met these days is making $2.5 million a year or something. Like,
of course.
There's absolutely that kind of money is there. Because I said, well, darling, as a podcaster, I can't even pay my rent. But then I'm thinking, well, we're not the Met.
We're not the Met.
We're not doing like...
And you are not the conductor yet.
We're not doing Del Pano.
Or, and so the opera that I'm like most familiar with is Carmen because my sister was in the Boston Lyric Operas.
As a child?
She was, because there's all these children in the town in opera.
But, our Massachusetts labor laws... How does that intersect with that? I mean, she's not allowed to work that many hours a week.
No, so she would go to rehearsals like in the afternoon, like twice a week probably. And she would play the soundtrack like every day. She was like part of this kids like opera like after school thing, and then they got like cast through that. And so with Carmen, that's where the drama. So he has famous drama with the opera singer, one of the most famous opera singers in the world, Marias Callas.
Yes.
They have some serious drama.
Well, and then because there was a point at which she gets fired, it was splashed across the headlines. Bing fires Callas. There's always so much gossip reporting. It's like, and of course I got off at the plane in Milan, and the reporters were hounding me.
Yeah, like
I love that just opera news was this big of a deal.
Right, that it's like, and that's why those gossip clowns are there. So basically,
okay. Well, so first of all, when he goes to like see her sing for the first time in Italy, he's like, she's insanely fat.
And then when he talks about her losing like weight, he's like, well, she did look better. And he was like, she didn't look like a fat person who lost weight.
Wait, which I love that part where he was like, she didn't have any of the telltale signs of an ex-fatty.
I was like, you are insane.
He was like, she wasn't being so like loose skin about it. Like she actually looked like she just healthily lost the weight.
But that is the thing. It's like opera singers were known. It was like better if you were fat. People believed it was better if you were fat. Because, like, you could, like, sing harder.
Here's the part. During this summer, Miss Callas lost at least 50 pounds and became the astonishing, svelte, striking woman who conquered the operatic and much more than the operatic world. It was like Andersen's fairy tale. She showed none of the signs one usually finds in a fat woman who has lost weight. She looked as though she had been born to that slender and graceful figure and had always moved with that elegance.
So him and Maria Callas, huge. I think it set the world afire. Like it was the Michael Bay to Megan Fox drama. That's a random reference, but
You're random. Yeah. Well, it was quite. Like Scarlett Johansson suing Disney for her share of Black Widow, or whatever. I mean, it was really quite intense. And so it starts out with her just being this insane diva, and she is demanding so much. Oh, she's demanding way more money than anyone's ever made. She's I need so many plane tickets.
And then at one point she lowballs him as I feel a really fun power game, which I love, where he was fine, I will offer you $600 a week. And she goes, I'll do it for $200 a week.
Oh, yeah.
And he was no. You will do it for $600 a week, because obviously he knew if she did it for $200, she'd have something up her sleeve.
Yes.
He also refers to her concubines, which I wonder was she bi? Because he was and I will not pay for tickets for any lovers, squirrels, pets, or concubines.
What he was saying, well, the later part where he was talking about the IRS at the very end, and he was just being and, the way that European singers try to conceal their income from the IRS, poodles become secretaries, husbands become agents, and, everyone is, suddenly a write-off.
Rarely did they have composers for new composers.
Right. Because usually they're just, doing Mozart and Beethoven and whatnot. They're doing dead guy stuff.
Right. Or doing, the old operas, Aida.
Right.
And he's new operas didn't do that well, which I feel just until now, is still the thing. I think it's really hard to break through with a new opera.
Well, certainly at the Met. I mean, obviously it's just PS1 is putting on Colin Self's opera.
Right.
Friend of the pod.
Colin Self.
And
right.
You can do your experimental queer opera at museum stuff, and art world stuff is doing that, but in the actual opera world, they're not. And the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra is not even doing
but
a new
read
composer.
about some new opera last year, and of course I do not remember what it is, but I do remember, and it was
Lily read about an opera last year.
Look, and as you know, as I mentioned, I come from an opera family, so I like to stay.
Can we actually hold? If I may pause for a second, do you like opera?
Yes,
because I have to say I actually don't like opera that much.
I am so much more anti-classical because I love words. I love singing. I need
word hound over here.
Passion.
Yeah.
And so an opera to me, I also find the music a little bit sexier than just strings, violin, blah blah blah. Pavarotti. It feels like someone's getting murdered.
The murder part I love. I guess where I struggle with opera is I do feel like they come in at a 10 and it stays at a 10 the whole time. And there's this insane drama from the very beginning of the show where it's oh, and I'm okay, has anything even happened yet? You know what I mean? Because the productions are always very static. They have to be because of the singing. So it's not it's not an actual musical play.
Well, when was the last time you saw an opera?
I saw an opera. I've saw an opera at the Bastille in Paris. I've seen an opera at the Met once. It is. I
feel the costumes are very glamorous, but no, they can't move a lot.
There's not a ton of movement. There's not a ton of dancing.
Singing.
You know what I mean? Yeah, they're singing. And
I'm a little talking about more listening.
I mean, yes, I get it, but I just and then I don't like that I can't see, because when you're going to a classical show and you're seeing the Boston Symphony Orchestra, you're seeing the players, right?
Yeah,
they're all on stage.
I don't want to see. I guess, and I think because you are a pianist, I'm not dying.
But
if I'm seeing this big mezzo soprano and she's on stage, okay, and she's belting and moving, and there's costumes, and someone's dressed as a lion, and then someone's murdering each other. I don't need to see a man in his penguin suit, string.
I also think that because for me, and again, it's the language thing. It's they're usually singing in Italian. Even if they're singing in English, it's very hard to understand the actual lyrics that they're saying. Because of
But isn't that the
way
romance
that
if you're hearing someone sing in Italian?
I totally get that that's the romance. But for me, it's I'm frustrated that I can't actually hear the words they're saying, as opposed to you go see Chicago on Broadway, you can understand every word perfectly. And, or as opposed to classical, where the notes are the words, right? And you hear that G sharp. And
it sounds like you actually have a fear of being out of the loop.
Well, that is deeply accurate.
You're well, I can't hear the lyrics, then wow, this isn't for me.
I feel so called in and called out, and you're 100% correct. God, that's so true. It's like my biggest fear in the world.
Right. You don't want to be out of the loop because you literally are a clown. You're this writer at the opera.
Clown.
You're this gossip clown. So you're like,
I need to know.
And since opera usually is basically all gossip, it's like, oh, she cheated on him and fucked this other guy in 1722 in town square, but you don't know. So you're like, well, if I don't know, then the gossip isn't for anyone else, and I'm gonna say, well, why can't I see the violinist?
And it would be very my therapist to say something like, and what would be so devastating if you didn't know? I want to talk about the politics of Nazi affiliation because this was obviously huge in the European American cultural world post-war. And sort of like all of and it sort of starts to bleed into McCarthyism. And then there was this whole act where they were like preventing certain people from entering the country if they had affiliation or if their relatives had been affiliated with a government that had ended up being,
I'm almost surprised
taking over the Nazis or whatnot.
Bing wasn't blacklisted
by
McCarthy.
Right. No, I know. It's interesting. But he had already, been there. I feel like it started to take root a little bit later.
I also feel like it was more like random screenwriters.
Yeah.
And like not him just like being fabulous.
And they were like less caring about opera. But like, yeah, like there's this part where okay, Miss Flagsted's husband had worked for and with the Nazis, and after the conquest of Norway, she'd returned home to be at his side. Like, so this random woman's husband had, like, worked with the Nazis in Norway. But throughout that time, she had not sung in public. It seemed to me peculiar that an artist like Erna Berger, who had sung all through the war for the pleasure of the Nazi bigwigs in Berlin, could be acceptable at the Metropolitan, while Miss Flagstad had to be banned. And you're like, yes, peculiar indeed.
Yeah, you're like, absolutely peculiar that Miss Flagstad, like, couldn't come. And there is, I feel like he does have all these things, right, of just being sort of like, and were they a Nazi? Not sure. Well, they had an amazing voice. Moving on.
There's a part where he refers to somebody as being a mediocre conductor and an outstanding Nazi, and someone's like, I would prefer the reverse. I'm very like separate the art from the artist, and I do, I think that like, especially in that post time, you have these, everyone was all over the place during the war, and like, but at the same time,
and as we know, you're German.
Excuse me, my relatives came to this country long before the rise of the Nazis.
They didn't go to Argentina.
No, they did not flee to Argentina in 1945. Thank you very much.
Just wondering, because
I've never been to Buenos Aires.
There was some
and neither has my grandfather.
There was some horse in Buenos Aires, and you do know how to tango very well.
I have no idea why my grandmother excels at the tango.
One point of him saying, which I was actually surprised by because I think he would be so like support the star, but he's anti-diva and he's anti-solo curtain calls. Like the star coming out and everyone like clapping more. And then the rest of the cast having to listen to everyone clap more for them and them come out and like clap less.
Yeah, I mean, that's much more democratic.
Right, which it is, but I was like, isn't there,
But people love a hierarchy.
Yeah, I'm just like, I want to clap for,
You want to clap for the soloist. You know what I thought was a genius bit of psychomanipulation was when Maria Callas did get fired, and then there was that woman who had to, like, take her place and whatever it is. The understudy. And he hired someone to come into the theater and yell "Brava Callas" like to the audience right before she came on stage in a way that would engender sympathy with the audience because they would know that this guy was like being pro Maria, and then they would feel bad for her and the fact that she had to take over Maria. And he was like, the American propensity for the underdog would cause them to then be more supportive of her on stage. And of course it worked.
This is why he's the most genius general manager there has
lived. Know.
That is so American audience to be like, oh, we're going to root for her.
We're going to root for her after this like Callas buffoon
and I think people
yelled Brava Callas.
And of course people loved knowing that Callas was like such a diva.
Oh yeah, of course. I do also love how he calls out all of the all the singers who would always like claim to be sick, and they would be like being. I think it's a little less that they were Munchausen's and more that they were just like actually trying to not perform and be so like.
Right, because
like,
opera is so.
I can't show up. There are other artists for whom one demands a doctor's certificate whenever they call up to make excuses. Usually a hopeless demand because it is no trouble at all for a singer to procure from a doctor a letter reading Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so is under my care. But the act of demanding the letter is satisfying, and sometimes the implied distrust jolts a singer into re-examining his own condition and discovering that he can sing after all.
Rudolph Bing is also being so Friday Night Lights like coach in that way, where I feel like would like hire someone in the stands to do what he did, but he also is so like, I'm not taking excuses. He is this football coach, and maybe he's a little more Monica from Cheer, who's like so hard but like believes in you.
No, he's not like that. I don't see him as a Monica.
You don't think he's a Monica? But everyone's like so afraid and like.
I mean, when he was writing those
Monica.
long letters to that one fat guy, he was being like, and I'm writing to you this because I do have so much respect for you, and I hope you know that I'm taking this to him because you're a younger singer and you're not quite on the right path, but you will be on the right path soon enough.
I'd say he's a little tough love.
Okay, he is tough love. He's not like as in, like, I don't see him as like weirdly like serious.
I don't think he gets like as close.
Yeah.
To
And he's
his-
not as like emotional where he's like seeing himself in the people.
Yes,
like-
where he's being like, "This is my team." I feel like he's like, "Well, I'm a retired general manager, darling.
Yeah.
And this is
And
what
he
I do."
sees the talent as muscle. Like he sees them as just like, these are good singers and some of them could be great singers and hopefully we'll try to make them be better. But he's not like, he's like, he reminded me of me when I was a kid, where it's like Monica, I think, is getting like too involved.
She
and
definitely
she sees
is.
herself as a mother in this way.
So before we go to segments, did you read how he passed his last years of his life?
No, he doesn't mention that in his book that he wrote. He doesn't talk about how he died.
Right. So I did a little extra research. Nina passed away in 1983. And then he became involved he got Alzheimer's. And then he became involved with a woman who was 45 years old who had a mental illness. And she basically kidnapped him. And they went on a tour of Anguilla, London, Paris, Bahamas.
My dream cities.
She was like a founder of Rolls Royce. She was like obsessed with the Pope. Like she was completely insane. And they were found living in a homeless shelter in London in 1989.
What?
Yeah. And then finally, I guess like his old coworkers, they like got control and like annulled this marriage and like
So she just
got
like kidnapped him and he had fully had Alzheimer's, like didn't know where he was, and she was like, I'm
spending his money, and they were like going to Anguilla.
They didn't have kids, so who is going to leave his money to anyway?
Right. I think it was, and it wasn't even that insane. It was like he had 950,000, and then by the time they like annulled their marriage, he had 250,000.
Huh.
And then he went to some like home in Riverside, New York, and that's where he died.
It's like sadder to be at this home than it is to be in Anguilla with this woman who's
No, I
fleecing
know.
you.
This like
I'd rather like,
crazy-
if I get Alzheimer's, just fleece me till I'm gone. You know what I mean?
Celebrity Book Club.
Segments, darling. What does she eat?
What does she wear?
How does she live?
What does she eat? I mean, he actually doesn't.
He didn't mention food once in this.
Right, and he clearly is sizest.
Yes, he does not like a fat woman. And
but
he's
he is
quite,
a wine snob, as he does.
He's a
say.
wine snob, and he is thin. So I think he likes his wine. And I do think back then portions were smaller and he would just have like a small bit of steak. And
Yeah, and I think he would probably wake up and he would have like
he's very Anna Wintour, like that, like my lunch.
steak, my lunch.
Is steak and like this sort of olive oil sauce and like no cheese. But was there tomatoes?
Oh, because the
Or
whole
no, there
thing
was
a
cheese and no tomatoes.
caprese.
It was a caprese with steak and no tomatoes or something. insane.
Yeah, I know. But don't you also see
protein.
him as just one hard-boiled egg on this little hard-boiled egg like stand that he eats like slowly in the morning?
Yeah, I could see that in kind of like a phantom thread way, but perhaps there's like a little bit, there's like another little bowl.
I guess that's what he is. He's so Phantom Thread.
But then there's like another little bowl of like rabbit entrails.
fruit, and then like lunch. I feel like doesn't really happen unless he's going out to lunch in like a luncheon way.
They're quite busy. Yeah, but he also, I think he referred to getting to the office quite late one day, so maybe he actually is being more Spanish about it and just not having breakfast and like having German espresso and then being like, and then for lunch. Because there's a part where he says,
Maybe
I would
lunch?
go home for lunch, and he puts lunch in quotes. And I was like,
Is that when he fucks Nina?
I was like, yeah, are you and Nina fucking? And he's been like, well, darling, I'm not hungry. It's 4 p.m.
He probably is fucking her at lunch and being like, and that's when Nina and I make love because he was at the theater all night.
Yeah.
And that's also probably why he's kind of thin because he's probably not really having such a dinner.
And he's running
unless
around, yeah.
He is home with Nina or out to a dinner like on non-theater nights.
Yeah, I think
feel like
he's
he
having
might
like
be-
one piece of steak at 6 p.m.
And then also like throughout the show, maybe he like nibbles on like one little nut.
Yeah.
After the show in his
Very
office.
squirrel.
What does she wear?
What does she wear? Darling,
just suits. Suits.
He dresses. He has a tailor.
Okay.
He has a tailor in London. He has a tailor in New York. He
Bow
has
ties. And
a
of course
tailor in Berlin.
And he gets his shoe shine when he puts the
And he's just
shoes.
like, well, of course I was going to Milan, so I had to send for my clothes like 3 weeks in advance. And I get there on the steamer, and they've pressed the shirts. And of course they didn't have one of the shirts that I had requested. And
I don't think he's
chaos
being
ensued.
too also like insane smoking jacket. I think it's like his classic, just like black suit.
Yeah,
for the press.
well, because he does have, you know,
it's
he,
not like Rudolph Bing's famous cravat.
No, because he is a social democrat, as you know. And he kind of like poo-poos the fact that there is this whole like set of, you know, the extremely rich patrons of the Met, like on all the men in their tails, like all the men in their insane tuxedos who like just congregate in the like men's club area and
Right.
like don't actually donate that much to the Met. And like they are kind of like more of a drag on the institution than they are contributors.
He's being pretty just classic black.
So I
suit
think he's
and
like
bow tie.
Yeah, I think he has just like his regular tux that he like wears at opening night, but like
He's
it's
not right. So tails. He's anti clowns.
Yeah,
And like too rich
yeah,
tails
just-
who are there not because they love the opera, but just because maybe that's what you did then. darling.
exactly. And then how does he live? I mean, I think that they live in Essex House, that like building that's still there today.
Which is
it's in Midtown. Have you seen big sign on the top of the roof says Essex House in large
Oh.
letters? Maybe you've seen it.
didn't they like shoot Gossip Girl there?
Yeah, it's used quite often. I think in
Okay.
exterior shots of Gossip Girl. And at the very end, he goes, he's like, well, of course, you know, we couldn't leave because I was used to the chambermaids at Essex. He goes, though I remain a British subject, unaffectedly proud of having been knighted, I expect to stay in New York. After 23 years, the Essex House is home, and we could not hope to adjust to new chambermaids elsewhere.
He is just like is kind of being Chuck Bass and is just like I'm living in a hotel.
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of fabric.
And yeah, I was thinking heavy velvet fabrics everywhere,
Brocades.
lush couches that are like very thick but not like comfortable really. Like I don't ever see him really like lounging. I think he's like one pillow, goes to bed. Like he's not like putting his feet up really.
Yeah. Well, you don't think he's reading a book with his feet up?
On a Sunday, once a week.
Yeah.
Puts his feet up on a stool though. You know, he's not heavy lounging.
I think they have a lovely tufted ottoman, and I think that he's in like a gorgeous couch, and the feet are on the ottoman, babe. Let him have it. Let him have his tufted ottoman.
Okay,
You think he's being such a Puritan with his little wooden stool?
I guess I meant feet on couch.
Okay.
If we're really getting into it.
No, I think they have like a lovely little like a maid's desk that they use as a
then he
bar
has
cart.
this,
And
yes,
like,
and then he has this deep chair, and then of course the ping pong table, and
I don't think the ping pong table made it to New York. I think that was a Berlin
not in
thing.
Essex. But and then I could see him really having. I'm seeing him in also like his country home in this way, where he's like in the casual, maybe like white short sleeve button down that's 95 degrees. He's playing this wild ping pong game with Nina.
And he's having like a John Collins, like it's like a Tom Collins.
What do you
but
think
with
his
mint.
bathing suit was when he was in Anguilla when he had like Alzheimer's?
I'm like so high waisted, even
Yes.
though it was 1984. It was like such a 1930s swimming costume, and he's wearing a swim cap.
Right, swim cap, and he's like, I love the water. I give this book. I mean, it's so fabulous. I wish it was a little less list.
I know.
To get more into it.
There's not a ton of like personal stuff because when I think of Peggy was like one of my favorite books we've read, and she is so vulnerable and is talking about sex and death,
love
and
life, and
love
her family,
and also the war. Whereas he is really just mostly it's like personnel decisions that were made at various theaters.
And he is being so sassy about it.
I love
course.
the bitchiness. I love like the implication that Tristan and Isolde is a horrible opera, but like
and like that he does. I mean, the most he does spill. I feel like he uses this book also to pad the Maria to get his side of the story about Maria Callas.
Yeah.
So I'm giving this a 3.5 because it's so fab and it's iconic and like. Has there been a sassier general manager of the opera? No,
darling, I don't think there has been. If he has, he wasn't public about it. I mean, he put it all out there.
And I know he has another book, so maybe he gets more personal than that. But I also feel like that's more just lists of names.
Yeah, no, I'm also inclined to give this book 3.5 regional operas in Greater Germany.
3.5 Virginia, thrown out Virginia hams out of Virginia hams.
Who are you in the book,
Darling?
Not to pry.
Yeah, not to pry. Okay, I think you are, I think you have a little Bing in you, for sure. But you're not 100% Bing.
I see him as, he's a little fastidious. I mean, what I kind of like about him is that he's not so seeking the limelight and he, like, gets the headlines, but he's really trying to, like, deal with all these other personalities. And, I feel like I'm...
But he is very opinionated in the way you are, but you are more seeking the limelight. I think I see myself... probably as one of the clowns who showed up opening night. I got the messenger sent me.
I think we're both the clowns. We're opening night clowns.
And we're like, oh my God, did you just get messengered the invite?
Yes.
And we're getting gussied up and we get on the BMT line and take it. And we have martinis. And we're like, I can't believe we're at opening night. And like, we're like, wait, what's the opera?
Well, listen, club kids, this is my advice to you. You don't have to read this book, but what I do want you to do at some point in the next week or two, take yourself out to a performance. I don't care if it's the classical music. I don't care if it's opera. I don't care if it's a goddamn off-Broadway play, a rock and roll show, but go out.
A magic show. Go out and see someone perform. We are living in a city of culture. And then I want you to ask who's the stage manager. Then I want you to ask who is the general manager.
Yeah.
And then I want you to ask who is the assistant stage manager.
And I want you to do a little bit of research and be your own opening clown.
And throw in some opera maybe after you listen to this episode.
And if you live in New York, buy tickets to our show.
Yeah, if you want to go see some other kind of like live performance, that is Maria Callas Caliber, June 24th. Metropolitan Music Hall of Williamsburg.
Best. Darling, Celebrity Book Club is presented by Prologue Project, which is one of the finest theaters in all of Leipzig. The show is produced by accomplished pianist Benjamin Frisch, with additional support from mezzo-soprano Leon Nafok, Andrew Parsons, who has been very, very supportive of the role of our festival in city government, Arlene O'Revelo, who just launched her own festival in Edinburgh, and of course Madeline Kaplan, better known as the playwright James Birdie. Our production manager is Percia Berlin, who is actually a distinguished judge. An original theme song by Stephen Phillips Horst, who is a professor at the Music University of Scotland. Artwork by Teddy Blanks at Chips NY, who was just knighted. Follow us on Twitter, at Instagram, at CBC The Pod. Subscribe, blah, blah, blah. Don't forget to tell your friends about it. And this is what I really want you to do, Jonathan. We're trying this new thing out. It's called Patreon.com. You're going to go over there. You're going to get access to what we're calling the VIP Lounge. I mean, this is a special club, and it's all the movers and the shakers. And you're going to get to hang out with them, and you're going to get ad-free podcasts. Not a single ad the whole podcast. You're going to get to hear this really lovely extra episode every week where you're really going behind the scenes, and we're telling you how it all goes down. And so you're going to go to patreon.com/CBCthepod, and you're going to subscribe, and you're going to do it, and you're not going to regret it, and that's all it is. And, I really hope you have a lovely time, and we'll see you soon.